Well, must be over 30 years since we were here on a hot July day in 1982, filming what would become the very first film from Artemis Film, which was The Visitors. And yeah, it's a kind of hot, sweaty July, and I'd probably say the smells and the atmosphere of this amazing location are so similar to what they were all those years ago. What has changed, of course, is that all the original participants of that film, The Visitors, although still alive, I think most of them are still alive, certainly aged, and been a lot of changes. Some people still involved in film production, and some people not. But from what I can gather from the people that I've been in contact with since I set up the Facebook project, is that I'm yet to meet anybody who hasn't any kind of fond memories of that period. So Corehouse, it's kind of weird being back at Corehouse, because I've not actually been here for many years, and the structure behind us is actually a Victorian greenhouse. But in terms of The Visitors, I mean, The Visitors is a science fiction film. Basic rundown of the plot was we have a character called the Visitor, who basically lands on a planet lifted straight out of Nicholas Roeg's Man Who Fell to Earth. We actually filmed Richard in the River Clyde, basically landing and then coming out of the water, and he's on the run from an android called the Exterminator. There's basically war has broken out between two planets, one humanoid, one robotic, and Richard's character is basically running for his life through this kind of green Earth type planet. And very short film, 17 minutes, but basically a kind of chase movie. Richard being chased by George Elder, who's playing an android, and myself, I played another character called the Rescuer, who beams down to the planet but actually fails to rescue the Visitor. And the reason why this location is momentous is because it was actually the finale of The Visitors was filmed here, and Richard must take a lot of the credit for that because he storyboarded it. With it being our first film, there's an awful lot of kind of long shots and medium shots, but this final sequence had dramatic cuts, it had dramatic close-ups. Richard did a lot of work with pyrotechnics. He built guns that could actually fire. The bulbs used to get in cameras, so when the characters actually fired a gun, you could actually see a flash going off. We used flash powder. So for its time, quite a dramatic battle sequence, and it was all filmed here at the famous Victorian greenhouse. Other movies that used this, some of The Hunt was shot in Corehouse Nature Reserve. We're actually standing in Corehouse Nature Reserve, and part of The Hunt was filmed here. Bits of Millennium. I think some short scenes from Full Letter Profanity were done here, but very much this was the location for The Visitors and The Hunt. It was very easy to make films because nobody made films. It was unheard of. Young people wanted to be rock stars, didn't want to become filmmakers, and it was difficult. I mean, to make a film, you had to access film equipment, which was expensive. You had to buy film stock, which was expensive, and you had to have a certain amount of discipline, which most kids would rather go to a disco than make a film. So you didn't have the kind of easy access to technology which you have now. We've been running a comic called Vulcan Magazine for a few years, and the bulk of the guys on the comic actually came with us and made the films. And of course another element was there's also a chap called David Grieve who'd actually been making films for a few years before us, and he was a major influence because he'd been making horror films. And prior to us making our first film, we'd not actually thought you could actually go out and make a genre movie like science fiction or horror. We'd perhaps imagine you might, I don't know, make a film about somebody having a picnic or a day out or a short comedy, but no, you wouldn't be going out and making Star Wars and Halloween. That was a kind of revelation to us, and that was a major creative spark in terms of the Artemis movies. Well, I recently made a genre film called Legend of Black Diamond, which is a steampunk western, which definitely had elements of The Hunt. In fact, of all the films I've made since The Hunt, it's probably the most Huntesque type movie. It wasn't totally difficult to make, but then I'm a much older person, and I'm also running a professional video production company. So in terms of contacting people, people would instantly take me seriously, and I could usually negotiate locations. And I also had the financial muscle to actually pay for certain things. Would they have treated me so seriously when I was 19? I'd never made a film before. My colleagues were teenagers at school. Richard was 15. Would we have got so much help today? Probably not, because the climate back in the early 80s was a lot more kind of welcoming. We could just kind of walk into an area like this, which is privately owned, and meet the landlord, and he would look favourably upon a bunch of kids making films. He wouldn't instantly think we were here to vandalise or here to steal. But probably the biggest change that's happened in modern times is to do with money. Everybody wants to make money from films. They just see films as a mechanism for making money. So back in the 80s, I could negotiate to use a whole castle. And those two famous castles we used, Doune Castle and also Creednethin Castle. No fee was paid. They were just quite willing to help young filmmakers. Whereas I know now, to do it now, we'd have to go through a very protracted legal process. We'd have to have £5 million of public liability insurance, and we'd probably have to pay a fee, honestly. Because so many films are now being made, most organisations like councils, private companies, when they hear film, they just see a dollar sign. It can make a difference. I mean, back in the 80s, we were able to access fabulous locations, like for example, Corehouse Nature Reserve. It's a bit like kind of mini Lord of the Rings. Within this one complex, we have strange Victorian structures like this. We have waterfalls like Niagara. We have woods. We have bridges. We have creepy mausoleums. I don't know how big this area is, but you could get lost in it. It's X miles long, and we had full run of this place. I'm pretty sure now if we landed here with 25 costumed people running about with guns, that very quickly the police would be called. Yeah, the plan is to re-edit The Hunt, and shoot a documentary to basically go along with it, and bring it out digital version on DVD, and probably do something with the rest of the films as well. Sometimes these hot summer shoots, I wouldn't say it was like fighting in Vietnam, but it had similarities. I remember on The Visitors, there was one guy, and it was really hot like this, and we went for lunch, and he said, "Can I just stay here and have some juice?" And I said, "Okay." So we went back to the car and had some lunch. And when we came back, all we could find was his boots. We never saw him again. His parents didn't seem too troubled by his disappearance, but sometimes things like that happened. I mean, most of the people that we worked with came through it. There were psychological problems. Some took to drink. But in the years we were making films, I think Artemis only ever lost 3 people. It was always the same. We'd come back from lunch and all that'd be left would be their boots. Sometimes boots and socks. Sometimes boots, socks and cream for athletes' feet. But generally speaking, it was just boots. So I don't know what that means, and most of these crimes remain unsolved, but in those days we just couldn't laugh these things off.